At length the trees grew smaller and stood farther apart, and the ground began to rise, and it got more and more steep, till the trees were all left behind, and the two were climbing a narrow path with rocks on each side. Suddenly they came upon a rude doorway, by which they entered a narrow gallery cut in the rock. It grew darker and darker till it was pitch dark, and they had to feel their way. At length the light began to return, and at last they came out upon a narrow path on the face of a lofty precipice. This path went winding down the rock to a wide plain, circular in shape, and surrounded on all sides by mountains. Those opposite to them were a great way off, and towered to an awful height, shooting up sharp, blue, ice-enameled pinnacles. An utter silence reigned where they stood. Not even the sound of water reached them. Looking down, they could not tell whether the valley below was a grassy plain or a great still lake. They had never seen any place look like it. The way to it was difficult and dangerous, but down the narrow path they went, and reached the bottom in safety. They found it composed of smooth, light-colored sandstone, undulating in parts, but mostly level. It was no wonder to them now that they had not been able to tell what it was, for this surface was everywhere crowded with shadows. It was a sea of shadows. The mass was chiefly made up of the shadows of leaves innumerable, of all lovely and imaginative forms, waving to and fro, floating and quivering in the breath of a breeze whose motion was unfelt, whose sound was unheard. No forests clothed the mountain-sides, no trees were anywhere to be seen, and yet the shadows of the leaves, branches, and stems of all various trees covered the valley as far as their eyes could reach. They soon spied the shadows of flowers mingled with the leaves, and now and then the shadow of a bird with open beak and throat distended with song. At times would appear the forms of strange, graceful creatures, running up and down the shadow bowls and along the branches, to disappear in the wind-tossed foliage. As they walked, they waded knee-deep in the lovely lake. For the shadows were not merely lying on the surface of the ground, but heaped up above it like substantial forms of darkness, as if they had been cast upon 1,000 different planes of the air. Tangle and Mossy often lifted their heads and gazed upwards to descry whence the shadows came, but they could see nothing more than a bright mist spread above them, higher than the tops of the mountains, which stood clear against it. No forests, no leaves, no birds were visible. After a while, they reached more open spaces, where the shadows were thinner, and came even to portions over which shadows only flitted, leaving them clear for such as might follow. Now a wonderful form, half bird-like, half human, would float across on outspread sailing pinions. Anon, an exquisite shadow group of gambolling children would be followed by the loveliest female form, and that again by the grand stride of a titanic shape, each disappearing in the surrounding press of shadowy foliage. Sometimes a profile of unspeakable beauty or grandeur would appear for a moment and vanish. Sometimes they seemed lovers that passed, linked arm in arm, sometimes father and son, sometimes brothers in loving contest, sometimes sisters, entwined in gracefulest community of complex form. Sometimes wild horses would tear across, free, or be strode by noble shadows of ruling men. But some of the things which pleased them most, they never knew how to describe. About the middle of the plain they sat down to rest in the heart of a heap of shadows. After sitting for a while, each, looking up, saw the other in tears. They were each longing after the country whence the shadows fell. "We must find the country from which the shadows come," said Mossy. "We must, dear Mossy," responded Tangle. "What if your golden key should be the key to it?" "Ah, that would be grand," returned Mossy. "But we must rest here for a little, and then we shall be able to cross the plain before night." So he lay down on the ground, and about him on every side and over his head was the constant play of the wonderful shadows. He could look through them, and see the one behind the other, till they mixed in a mass of darkness. Tangle too lay admiring, and wondering, and longing after the country whence the shadows came. When they were rested, they rose and pursued their journey. How long they were in crossing this plain, I cannot tell. But before night, Mossy's hair was streaked with grey, and Tangle had got wrinkles on her forehead. As evening drew on, the shadows fell deeper and rose higher. At length they reached a place where they rose above their heads, and made all dark around them. Then they took hold of each other's hand, and walked on in silence, and in some dismay. They felt the gathering darkness, and something strangely solemn besides, and the beauty of the shadows ceased to delight them. All at once Tangle found that she had not a hold of Mossy's hand, though when she lost it she could not tell. "Mossy! Mossy!" she cried aloud in terror. But no Mossy replied. A moment later the shadows sank to her feet, and down under her feet, and the mountains rose before her. She turned towards the gloomy region she had left, and called once more upon Mossy. There the gloom lay tossing and heaving, a dark, stormy, foamless sea of shadows, but no Mossy rose out of it, or came climbing up the hill on which she stood. She threw herself down, and wept in despair. Suddenly she remembered that the beautiful lady had told them, if they lost each other in a country of which she could not remember the name, they were not to be afraid, but to go straight on. And besides, she said to herself, Mossy has the golden key, and so no harm will come to him, I do believe. She rose from the ground and went on. Before long she arrived at a precipice, in the face of which a stair was cut. When she had ascended halfway, the stair ceased, and the path led straight into the mountain. She was afraid to enter, and turning again towards the stair, grew giddy at sight of the depth beneath her, and was forced to throw herself down in the mouth of the cave. When she opened her eyes, she saw a beautiful little creature with wings standing beside her, waiting. "I know you," said Tangle. "You are my fish." "Yes, but I am a fish no longer. I am an Aranth now." "What is that?" asked Tangle. "What you see I am," answered the shape, "and I am come to lead you through the mountain." "Oh, thank you, dear fish, Aranth, I mean," returned Tangle, rising. Thereupon the Aranth took to his wings, and flew on through the long, narrow passage, reminding Tangle very much of the way he had swum on before her when he was a fish. And the moment his white wings moved, they began to throw off a continuous shower of sparks of all colors, which lighted up the passage before them. All at once he vanished, and Tangle heard a low, sweet sound, quite different from the rush and crackle of his wings. Before her was an open arch, and through it came light, mixed with the sound of sea waves. She hurried out, and fell, tired and happy, upon the yellow sand of the shore. There she lay, half asleep with weariness and rest, listening to the low plash and retreat of the tiny waves, which seemed ever enticing the land to leave off being land and become sea. And as she lay, her eyes were fixed upon the foot of a great rainbow standing far away against the sky on the other side of the sea. At length she fell fast asleep. When she woke, she saw an old man with long white hair down to his shoulders, leaning upon a stick covered with green buds, and so bending over her. "What do you want here, beautiful woman?" he said. "Am I beautiful? I am so glad," answered Tangle, rising. "My grandmother is beautiful." "Yes, but what do you want?" he repeated kindly. "I think I want you. Are not you the old man of the sea?" "I am." "Then grandmother says, have you any more fishes ready for her?" "We will go and see, my dear," answered the old man, speaking yet more kindly than before. "And I can do something for you, can I not?" Yes, show me the way up to the country from which the shadows fall, said Tangle, for there she hoped to find Mossy again. Ah, indeed, that would be worth doing, said the old man. But I cannot, for I do not know the way myself. But I will send you to the old man of the earth. Perhaps he can tell you. He is much older than I am. Leaning on his staff, he conducted her along the shore to a steep rock that looked like a petrified ship turned upside down. The door of it was the rudder of a great vessel, ages ago at the bottom of the sea. Immediately within the door was a stair in the rock, down which the old man went, and Tangle followed. At the bottom, the old man had his house, and there he lived. As soon as she entered it, Tangle heard a strange noise, unlike anything she had ever heard before. She soon found that it was the fishes talking. She tried to understand what they said, but their speech was so old-fashioned and rude and undefined that she could not make much of it. "I will go and see about those fishes for my daughter," said the old man of the sea. And moving a slide in the wall of his house, he first looked out, and then tapped upon a thick piece of crystal that filled the round opening. Tangle came up behind him, and peeping through the window into the heart of the great deep green ocean, saw the most curious creatures, some very ugly, all very odd, and with especially queer mouths, swimming about everywhere, above and below, but all coming towards the window in answer to the tap of the old man of the sea. Only a few could get their mouths against the glass, but those who were floating miles away yet turned their heads towards it. The old man looked through the whole flock carefully for some minutes, and then turning to Tangle said, "I am sorry, I have not got one ready yet. I want more time than she does, but I will send some as soon as I can." He then shut the slide. Presently a great noise arose in the sea. The old man opened the slide again, and tapped on the glass, whereupon the fishes were all as still as sleep. "They were only talking about you," he said, "and they do speak such nonsense. Tomorrow," he continued, "I must show you the way to the old man of the earth. He lives a long way from here." "Do let me go at once," said Tangle. "No, that is not possible. You must come this way first." He led her to a hole in the wall, which she had not observed before. It was covered with the green leaves and white blossoms of a creeping plant. "Only white-blossoming plants can grow under the sea," said the old man. "In there you will find a bath, in which you must lie till I call you." Tangle went in, and found a smaller room or cave, in the further corner of which was a great basin hollowed out of a rock, and half full of the clearest sea-water. Little streams were constantly running into it from cracks in the wall of the cavern. It was polished quite smooth inside, and had a carpet of yellow sand in the bottom of it. Large green leaves and white flowers of various plants crowded up and over it, draping and covering it almost entirely. No sooner was she undressed and lying in the bath than she began to feel as if the water were sinking into her, and she was receiving all the good of sleep without undergoing its forgetfulness. She felt the good coming all the time, and she grew happier and more hopeful than she had been since she lost Mossy. But she could not help thinking how very sad it was for a poor old man to live there all alone, and have to take care of a whole seaful of stupid and riotous fishes. After about an hour, as she thought, she heard his voice calling her, and rose out of the bath. All the fatigue and aching of her long journey had vanished. She was as whole and strong and well as if she had slept for 7 days. Returning to the opening that led into the other part of the house, she started back with amazement, for through it she saw the form of a grand man with a majestic and beautiful face waiting for her. "Come," he said, "I see you are ready." She entered with reverence. "Where is the old man of the sea?" she asked humbly. "There is no one here but me," he answered, smiling. Some people call me the Old Man of the Sea. Others have another name for me, and are terribly frightened when they meet me taking a walk by the shore. Therefore I avoid being seen by them, for they are so afraid that they never see what I really am. You see me now, but I must show you the way to the Old Man of the Earth." He led her into the cave where the bath was, and there she saw, in the opposite corner, a second opening in the rock. "Go down that stair, and it will bring you to him," said the Old Man of the Sea. With humble thanks, Tangle took her leave. She went down the winding stair, till she began to fear there was no end to it. Still down and down it went, rough and broken, with springs of water bursting out of the rocks and running down the steps beside her. It was quite dark about her, and yet she could see. For after being in that bath, people's eyes always give out a light they can see by. There were no creeping things in the way. All was safe and pleasant, though so dark and damp and deep.